You can work on the data for all the accounts in the market because you can map out the TAM a lot more efficiently if an AI is doing it. And then you can score them and give them, a tier assignment. And then the SDRs or the humans, the people on your team can manage the tier 1s, maybe tier 2s, and the rest, maybe you can outbound. You don't have to either. Like you might say, I don't want to do any automated outbound. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be using tools like Clay or AI enrichments in your process.
Hi, and welcome back to On the House. Today we welcome back Bill Stathopoulos. Before we begin, I just want to say the reason I got into GTM in the first place was because of Bill. We had a chat, I was doing other things before this, and then I spoke to Bill, was like, oh, this seems interesting, read his book, and then, so I actually do want to genuinely say, and I've said to you privately, but thank you, because you are the guy that got me into GTM. Before we begin, Bill, because we've got loads of questions, I want to cover some new things today, but do you mind just giving us a quick intro into who you are and what you do?
Yeah. It means a lot. And thank you for sharing that again. It's genuinely a pleasure because I find a lot of pleasure in what I do. And the best way to see that is in the outcome of other people and their businesses. I've been in the B2B marketing space for the last 11 years now. And my goal has always been to help companies go to market in the most efficient way. Obviously, it used to be growth marketing 10 or 11 years ago. Now it's like go to market and a few more terms around it. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I get pleasure from. I also get a little bit of pleasure of sharing some of the things that I learn, along the way. Both of my parents are primary school teachers. I think I caught the bug. I realized it at some point. I run a go-to-market agency, Sales Captain. We're now 20 people from all over Europe, Asia, North America. We work with some incredible brands and also some brands that I'm genuinely hoping more people would get to know about if we do our job right. Today it's Clay, tomorrow it might be Claude Code, but the heart of it is doing good work with good people that you care about and getting a lot of fulfillment and having fun while doing it. So that's a little bit about me, at least like the main highlights.
Yeah, I love it. We've got loads of stuff today covering some of your recent posts, Clay versus Claude Code and all these things. I think before we kind of get into that, I think the first thing I'd like to cover is your 3-layer tiering system. Can you just briefly walk us through how you arrived at that, why that is the right way to break things down?
Yeah. I mean, it's the way I think about it. I don't know if it's necessarily the only way, and it's quite basic. I come from marketing, and I still remember back in the day when the CEO of the agency I was working at showed me the concept of like a funnel, and top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel, like my eye just popped. I was like, oh wow. Like there's people in different stages and you can influence how they think about things. And that's a concept that because I don't come from the sales world, even though I have done a lot of sales for the agency itself and other B2B companies, it was obvious to me that when you're going to market, not every channel that you can think of or not every campaign will have the same audience in terms of the quality of the audience, in terms of what the audience understands about you and your market. So the basic concept is there's obviously a really big audience that's not problem aware, that's not solution aware. They don't know if they have a problem. And this is usually the biggest audience for any company. These people are, in marketing terms, problem and solution unaware and brand unaware as well. They don't know you exist most likely. So these are the people that you can reach when you're reaching out to an ICP or an industry simply because they're part of that ICP. Like I want to reach out to outbound agencies because I've developed something for outbound agencies. Outbound agencies, like those prospects, don't necessarily know you exist, but you have something for them. So they can't really go on Google and search for something that doesn't exist. Like if I didn't know about Clay in 2023, I couldn't have Googled something like Clay. But if Clay reaches out to me in an outbound email, because I'm part of that audience, I am problem aware and solution and brand unaware, but still I would resonate. So that's the top layer. Then the second one is once you start digging into a certain sector and once you identify, for example, how can I do my list building in a more efficient way? Maybe you come across a post or whatever it might be and you end up commenting on that post. So then you become problem aware and maybe to an extent solution aware, because I commented on Bill's post about Clay and it's like an interesting one, and then Bill scraped the audience or someone else scraped the audience which engaged with the post and reached out. So this audience is both problem aware, probably also solution aware. Do they know about me? No. So that's like the last tier, which is brand aware. And brand aware is like, I know what the brand is. So I have a problem with outbound, my list building. I understand that there is a problem. I understand that there are solutions. And then at the bottom, I understand that there's a platform like Clay, or that there's an agency like Sales Captain. So bottom of the funnel, which is like the bottom tier, is people in your CRM, people who are engaging with your content, people who are joining your webinars, people that you meet at conferences, everyone who's brand aware. And because they're brand aware already, you can expect that they're also problem and solution aware. So this is always the smallest possible audience, but they're also the easiest audience to speak to. So in my head, it was like really obvious that if you're doing outbound, you want a healthy mix of all three, or at least you don't want to forget about brand aware if a good majority of your go-to-market goes through a platform, let's say like Clay. You want to constantly monitor for signals also from your CRM, also from the people visiting your website, also from the people engaging with your content on LinkedIn. You always want fresh content, fresh people. You want the top of the funnel, but you can't forget about the people who are already there. That was a whole concept.
If you're looking at new like data sources or scraping accounts, are you thinking your first job is to assign them to a bucket?
Yeah.
Would you say, yeah, and then go from
And
there?
that should also dictate the messaging, right? Like I should speak differently to someone who knows who I am. For example, and this is a live case, we scraped the attendees of a certain conference. One of them was a friend of mine. And we reached out, and because he knows what I do, he's also in the marketing space. So he calls me this morning and he was like, "Hey Bill, like I saw what you did there." And I was like, "You have to be more specific. I do a lot of different things. You have to specify." Like he said, "You did this." So I was like, "You have to be more specific." And he's like, "Yeah, you found all the contacts from that conference and you reached out." And in our case, we assumed that everyone who was in the platform was probably at the top of the funnel. They're not aware of who we are. So the messaging was quite like, hey, John, nice to meet you. I'm Bill, let's catch up at the conference. But in his case, he was at the bottom of the funnel because he's already he even told me at the end, if we can afford you in September, I want to work together, which was not the point. But like I messaged him with top of the funnel messaging, like the team did that, which is fine and we didn't mind, but that the framework of like, okay, what have they thought about us? Do they know about us before? Do they know who we are and what we do? Helps you also to kind of craft the right message for your audiences.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like you say, you can look at an event, look at all of the accounts and be like, which bucket does this account sit in? Or like, because it's more persona level, because it's like representatives and you might have a relationship with that person. And then you're going to be like, how am I going to outreach this person in advance of the event, depending on whether they know me or not and things like that, and actually really tailoring the messaging.
Yeah.
I saw another post you did. It was about building a BDR function. You suggested a 3-role architecture of a GTM strategist, a GTM engineer, and an AE. I would love to kind of get your take on why those 3 roles instead of one person doing everything.
Yeah, because there's a lot of complexity when you're a one-person team. And then when you have the 3 people I mentioned, you get more scalability through systems and tools, not through people. Because if you have one person, then you probably, if you want to scale, you need a second person and then third one. And then you need a manager and then you need the manager of the other manager. So I always look for things that can scale after the MVP, that can scale really well. That might not be the most cost efficient way, but can scale really well. Like these 3 roles need to exist somehow, one way or another. And maybe the go-to-market strategist is the head of sales, or it's the head of marketing, or it's the CRO. It doesn't need to be the specific, it's like the function. Like someone's in charge of the commercial strategy and messaging, which channels we're going to use. Someone is in charge of the technical aspect of it, which is, setting up the campaigns, the flows, the frameworks, but they need the guidance of the person that's in charge of the strategy. And then you also have, someone who acts as an AE. You can obviously do the same with a team of SDRs, and a lot of our clients have teams of SDRs. And what we do in those cases is we typically build internal tools that can kind of empower the SDRs. For example, one of our clients, like a really big company that sells to banks, they told us that they're coming out of a conference and they have like 180 people that a certain SDR on the team in the UK has collected as contacts, and he wants to kind of connect with them on LinkedIn. And what the SDR would have done otherwise would be click 180 times on LinkedIn. And we said, like, let's put them on a sequencer. We can connect with all of them, and then we can notify the SDR when they connect, when they accept, so that they can message with any messaging they'd like because they want it to be a little bit more custom. Or you might do the entire research, and you might gather the data, pass it on to the SDR, maybe give them sample messages that they can use if they want, and then the SDR can do whatever they want. So there's obviously no issue with having SDRs in your team. In fact, it's a model a lot of companies go with, especially if your audience is higher deals, a smaller number of accounts. That's the way to go. I'm always looking at ways that scale well. So that's always my angle. But for companies that want to do ABM or that have, as I said, high ticket deals, it's probably still the most cost efficient way, but you still can kind of take away certain things so that the SDRs are not burdened with so much kind of granular daily work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's the value that I see in what you do now. I used to see the value before is you're doing the outbound, you're getting the replies. Now I see it as you're the intelligence to find out the right accounts, target at the right time, do all the enrichments, do all the tiering. I know now, as a BDR, I don't think anyone could ever write AI copy like I can write copy or I can create my own script, because you just do it so many times. I don't think AI could beat me, and I think a lot of other reps feel the same. So it's all of that intelligence. So I find that your job changes depending on probably the industry and the size of the company.
Exactly. Why would you spend SDRs times, let's say you have certain ICPs you target, not every company is the same. Or let's say an SDR is an inbound SDR in charge of the web form submissions. Why would you have the SDR try to do reverse check if the Gmail address that signed up is from a big or small company? Have AI do that, give a list, pass on to the SDRs and assign directly the big and large accounts. The other ones, add them to an outbound campaign, add them to an ads audience, and then if they convert or if they show high engagement signals, yes, maybe pass them to an SDR. But it's when you have humans, you want to make them as productive as possible, otherwise you're wasting money. So it's not about replacing SDRs, it's about making sure that they can spend their time on the things that are going to close the deals. And it's in the best interest of the SDRs to be part of that process because you're essentially helping them close more.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because it's starting to really make sense. As an SDR, we're incentivized to go after tier 1 personas only because they count as double. Why would I go after a tier 2 persona when I've got to get twice as many of them? And so our targets are every day I need to be adding 12 new tier 1s. Everything is everyone I'm adding sequence to. Occasionally I'll add a tier 2 if I can't find a tier 1. But then it's almost who's going to then clean up the tier 2s and tier 3s? And also, how do we enable reps to go after tier 1s? And that comes back to essentially what you're doing. You can provide the intelligence to the tier 1s, and you can provide the infrastructure and outbound for the tier 2s and 3s. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's just that people think that if you're doing outbound, you have to touch every single account through outbound. It has to go through the sender. And my point is, you can work on the data for all the accounts in the market because you can map out the TAM a lot more efficiently if an AI is doing it. And then you can score them and give them, a tier assignment. And then the SDRs or the humans, the people on your team can manage the tier 1s, maybe tier 2s, and the rest, maybe you can outbound. You don't have to either. You might say, I don't want to do any automated outbound. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be using tools like Clay or AI enrichments in your process. That's kind of my beef right now with where the market is.
I tell you what, I'm super interested to hear your take on data quality for signals, for contact data. We'll get onto that in a little bit. Let's stay on just the building the BDR function. Just a couple more questions. What do you think a high performance BDR looks like? And I'll extend the question to what do you think about AI BDRs versus a non-AI BDR?
Oh my God. Have I ranted to you in the past about it? I think so. At the end of the day, the goal of a BDR is really simple. It's close the most number of deals that you can. So I think a high performance BDR is able to identify AI as an opportunity and not as a threat, and is able to be the one that raises their hand to be in the pilot of new AI enablement tools in the process. I think in 2026, if we're talking about what the skill is, obviously you need to be able to close, and then you need to be humble enough to be able to let go anything that's not the best use of your time, so that you can focus on actually crafting the message and selecting what's the number one thing that's worth saying to every account, which AI might have not foreseen, might not understand, might not have a sense of humor. So I think the clever SDR gives away the non-important stuff to AI and then uses their personality to bring in accounts. That's it. That's what is worth doing in 20, and uses their charm in a way that makes sense. Also picks up the phone because you can't get AI to do that. So we still need people like multi-channel. If you're doing high-ticket deals, it's all about the phone. So I think smaller number of accounts that have been scored, then you have all the data, and you don't have to look at the Slack channel that constantly gets notifications because the important ones are being filtered to you and the right kind of data is being surfaced and fed to you in an easy to understand way. And then you can pick up the phone, you can send emails, you can send LinkedIn messages, you can even send texts if you have to. So I think that's what a smart SDR would do. And then on the second part, I don't think AI BDRs and human BDRs compete at all. I think AI BDRs compete with automated outreach, maybe automated tier 2 and tier 3 outreach. I think that's the actual kind of comparison, or that's where kind of the AI BDRs have a chance. And they do in really certain cases where the targeting and the messaging is already defined. And the way I explain that is, if you want to go to market for the first time and you're not really sure about the audience, you're not really sure about the job titles, the best industries, the number one problem, the offer, etc. The AI BDR is only as good as the data you provide. AI, like everyone has talked to AI, I assume, who's watching this. Garbage in, garbage out. Like if you give a crappy input to AI, it's going to give you a crappy output. It's exactly the same thing with an AI BDR. If you know really well who your audience is, and if you know really well what your message is, it's going to be easier to get results. But it's also going to be easier to get results with any outbound tool. Like you can use Ample Market or you can use Lemlist, buy the inboxes, set up the sequence, upload the leads, and you're still going to win. So I don't think the AI BDRs, as it stands right now, are like the ultimate kind of solution that people are thinking about. And that's why like the churn rate in all these platforms is still high. I'm not saying that they don't work. I'm just saying that the thing that makes them work is a human being spending time with the tool, which you would still do if you were doing it in-house, doing it with an agency, doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about it. It's not competing with real BDRs, it's competing with automated outreach. The next kind of question on that post was, you were talking about Clay versus Claude code and when to use which and for what. How do you see things going? Which one do you use? Maybe throw Perplexity into the mix, like any other kind of AI tools. What are you using them for? And how does that like workflow look?
It's crazy. I'll say it looks crazy. Everyone's going after Clay, from building the Clay replacement to stripping down the costs by adding other data providers. Clay is joining in on the fan. They now have, I don't know if this is live yet. I'm not going to talk. Clay is joining in on the fan. That's all I'm going to say. Like they're definitely monitoring the situation in a positive way. And at the same time, AI companies keep shipping new features. I would say the interesting thing is Clay replacement is not the biggest USP for AI right now. Like it's still building custom data scrapers. For example, there was a database of security certifications that we wanted to tap into that only had the search box that was protected by Cloudflare and that you had to type in the search box to get any results. So we genuinely used Claude to build a playwright scraper that actually inputted 676 characters, would get the output, scrape it, bypass Cloudflare every single time. And we ended up with a list that no competitor had. So I don't think there's like one use case, there's countless use cases. We've built things from like interfaces for SDRs, interfaces for our own team, automated processes. Like it's much bigger than to just compare Claude Code or Perplexity or the output of any AI right now with just Clay. Clay is really good if you want really good data. It's really good because you have human beings who are in charge of APIs breaking and needing an update, which happens more frequently than people think because, you know, the Prospect API might change or the Lemlist API might change and you have to do it yourself. So I think the only thing to be mindful of is Clay will probably always have a use case, same as Zapier will always have a use case because not everyone is fluent on an A10. And if the flow breaks on an A10, you still need someone with dev-like qualities to fix it. If you have a person in-house, that person is now more empowered than ever before. Amazing. But if you don't have devs in-house and you're trying to build things on Claude Code, when they break, You're taking time out of your day, and what does that mean of where you spend your time? So if someone thinks that the best use of their time is being, a developer and acting as a developer, amazing. AI has definitely empowered developers, and we're seeing the stats from companies like Shopify saying that it ships like something like 40 or 60% of their code. But if you ask me, for example, what's the best use of my time, like it's definitely not building things on Claude Code. Is it building things so I understand how it works and I can enable someone else on the team to do that? 100%. Is it educating the market about what's available and looking at all the use cases? 100%. But I'm not personally spending my time building things with Claude Code on a daily basis, because then I'm not hiring the best people. I'm not advising our clients on how to go to market. I'm not training our team. I'm not working on all the other things that I need to be working on from my end. So the possibilities are genuinely endless. We just did a webinar with Salesforce with it, and we kind of shared a few things on our end. Our team is using it all the time in all different use cases, from content creation to building and automating things, to building interfaces, to doing actual enrichments as well. Yeah, but clay replacement is not like my number one use case.
Obviously, if you're a developer, you might always want to be hunting for what's the best solution. But if you're a business type person, you want to go for speed and what gets the result. And sometimes Zapier gets the result. And if you've got the budget to have more tools, and it gives the people the ability to be able to work with the tool that works best for them and gets the same outcome, someone might prefer clay. Yeah, it's interesting. Just a quick kind of curveball. What do you think of Freckle? And the reason I asked that question is, as a BDR, I'm starting to get some really good results by incorporating Freckle into my workflow. I'll jot down a list of accounts that I think are good every week. I'll then upload them into Freckle, use the Apollo integration to pull out all the key data, and then it's like clay basically, but it's simpler, cheaper, it comes out of my own pocket. And then I'll find, like, is it a parent company or is it PE backed? And then if it's PE backed, I can get the name of the fund, and I can then say, we work with other portcos, so I can get all of this like information. I'll start adding prospects and da. I don't think I could do that with clay, but with Freckle, it's like a lightweight BDR. Like, exactly. I could use it, and I could easily allow others to use it. So what do you think in a scale up? What do you think of Freckle enabled BDR versus maybe they should just be doing outreach and this should all be done for them?
Yeah, no, I think a Freckle enabled BDR, that's why I said we also used Claude Code to build mini interfaces that get data from clay that then BDRs can use. Yeah, I don't think a BDR, similarly, I don't think a BDR should be using clay, because the amount of complexity and the learning curve and the amount of new features that come out make you not the best fit person to be doing it at scale. Because if all you need is data from Apollo or Apollo type of data, you can use Freckle and get the data. But if you're on clay, like, what actually makes or breaks someone using clay is, like, are you using the Prospeo API? Are you using zero bounds for data validation? Which API keys are you using for the data research, and which API keys are you using for copywriting? Like, you have to have a scale in order to be able to use clay efficiently. Otherwise, you're just paying for a subscription that's not really benefiting you. Like, you can use the Lemlist integration, which sits on top of the CRM and can give you basic enrichment. It can give you an email address on top of a LinkedIn profile. You can use Freckle, as you mentioned. And I think in those cases, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If someone hasn't built, and that's what we did for a few companies, if someone hasn't built a mini interface, maybe even like a Chrome extension that a BDR can use really easily to get the data they want out of a pre-built clay table, maybe one table per ICP, but how you kind of build it doesn't matter that much. And I think there's still probably money to be made and projects to be built, building more custom solutions for SDRs, which is one of the things that we're doing. But yeah, Freckle, like 100%. I think it's definitely valid for people who have that use case as well. HubSpot is also doing its own thing with CRM enrichment. It's interesting to see where they're going to take it. You also have other kind of downsides. Like, I started receiving emails with people opting out of HubSpot's enhanced enrichment, which meant we have to now delete all the enriched data we had because someone requested it on a different account. Anyways, yeah, it's interesting. Let's just say it's a developing industry, 100%. Data is going to be a big role in what we do, and it's changing all the time, which gets me super excited.
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, I don't want to spend too long here, but it's almost like there is a stage where you want a BDR, Freckle-enabled BDR, but then there's a later stage when it's like, now we actually want to have territories and assign accounts, and that's all done within clay tables within a bigger team. So a lot of it is stage dependent as well.
100%. And also, who's paying for it, who's managing it, how intelligent is the person managing it, do they understand what it takes? Like there's other subtle questions. Do the SDRs end up paying it out of pocket because they're getting paid enough, but their company's not smart enough to implement it? Like there's still people paying for Zoom info. Like that's what I'm gonna say. There's still people paying for Zoom info without a good reason. I'm sure there's use cases. I'm not stressing it. Don't sue me like this. I'm sure there's use cases, but I'm also certain that there's people paying for Zoom info because they're like, oh, we need a data provider. Okay, I use Zoom info at my previous company. Let's buy a subscription.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because before this, again, I thought you had the same type of client, but now I'm starting to realize you have various different clients, and some you're doing outbound for, some you're doing intelligence for, you're doing a lot of custom kind of build work. I'd be really interested to know, like maybe an example, or if you can't think of the top of your head, like you get a new client, they come in, what your process then looks like. What's your typical time to value, and then what sort of results can they expect after a period of time? And one bit in particular I'd really like to focus on in this is how you do your TAM definitions, TAM mapping, and then TAM tracking.
We have a really smart team from the moment someone first speaks to us that's able to ask the right questions and understand exactly what the people who want to work with us want. So we have projects that are coming in, as you mentioned, rightly so, that want outbound performance, let's say, performance marketing. Like you run the campaigns, you figure out the ICP, you use Clay, you use Apollo, doesn't matter. What matters is you bring in kind of the positive reply, the demo request, whatever it is. And then we have clients that want more custom builds. When it comes to more custom builds, the KPI is always not the same. So that's one thing that you have to be really clear about, because by bringing in better data, you know that the company is going to have better performance, but then you can't really guarantee the performance of the BDRs because you don't really know how they're performing. So setting KPIs in that kind of sense is a little bit dangerous and something that we're always cautious about, because we can kind of prove the value by saving, let's say, 4 hours a week from every SDR, but then we don't necessarily know if they're going after the right audience if we haven't done the go-to-market plan for them and if we haven't reviewed all the possible channels that they're using to go to market. So in these projects, we don't necessarily target like a direct performance outcome in that sense. We target things like the SDRs being able to pick up the phone 10% more times within the day, and that is probably translated to value for the business. So that's how we typically go about it and measure the success, because the project might vary quite a bit. As we also discussed, it might be that it's better data for everyone in the TAM, and then tier 2 and 3 you only do outreach for. So the KPIs are 2 or 3 different things at the same time. So as long as that's clear and as long as the expectations are clear, totally fine. And then in terms of mapping out the TAM, it always depends on who we're going after, right? Like we had a case when going to market for Nestle, we wanted to target every hotel in Thailand. So we scraped Agoda, TripAdvisor, Google Maps, Kayak, a few more platforms, Booking.com, combined the data, then enriched it with LinkedIn profiles, employee data, and then we had the actual TAM. You might want to do it in a quicker way because you only want higher level data without that complexity. So it always depends on why you're doing it and how you're going to use the data later. And then in terms of tracking of the data, I think Clay still is one of the good solutions out there that people can use. HubSpot also has a nice intent signal, as they're calling it, kind of tracking mechanism where you can have the account, you can select different signals and it's going to be tracking what happens. I think the smartest thing to do if you go down that route is also scoring the account and the action. So we've built kind of a model, and I have a different deck with that, where you score the account obviously, and then you maybe score the account periodically every 6 months in case they've received funding or they've grown, etc. But then you also score the actions and you keep track of the actions per account, because someone visiting your website once and 10 people from the same company visiting the pricing page at the same week is not the same kind of signal. And it shouldn't be fed to the SDR team the same way, or at least with the same weight, because the SDR should prioritize the tier 1 account that has also visited the pricing page 10 times. So there's a little bit more nuance to it. It always has to do with market maturity, but yeah, it's interesting projects. I genuinely love being able to build more complicated workflows and not just okay, find the audience, enrich it, add content, outreach makes it more fun. If you add multi-channel as well, if you add ads, tracking of the ads, we live in fun times, and it's genuinely, exciting.
Interesting. And are you doing scoring always the account level? Like you mentioned, like you might figure out that John, if you're obviously in the US, like John visited the website from that account, Alex visited the website, but you're only scoring back at the account level. And then kind of following on from that, obviously that come out of a score like 69 out of 100 or 73 out of 100. So people aren't going to see that score. They're just going to see whether it moves into tier one or out of tier one.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still trying to keep it to those like tight buckets? And then are you adding any persona weighting into that? Like this guy is hot, but might be a tier 3 account, but this
Correct.
guy for whatever reason loves us, and we have to prioritize him.
Yeah, so you have both the account score and the tiers that get assigned. Obviously, the account score includes the tier. Like other ICPs are more important, other company sizes are more important. So the account score itself takes into consideration the tier itself. And then it's like a 2-axis map where you have, high intent, high fit score or high account score, low intent, et cetera, et cetera. So you end up with like 4 quadrants. And then you can act in different ways, and that's the lovely part about it. And maybe low value account, low tier account, low kind of signal activity would do nothing. We don't have to act on everyone. And that's where it becomes a little bit smarter than just, let's reach out to everyone.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Something I think you'd be interested in as well, that I learned this from Vatisse, is I always thought tier 1 was always about more signals, signal stack. But actually, like what I've come to learn is sometimes tier 1 isn't signal. Sometimes, let's just say, like you're selling a solution for when a team hasn't been built yet. That is the perfect scenario to maybe help them with building that out. And so that actually overrides any signal like recent M&A or cost optimization, because this is the time to reach out, but there's no signals and it's automatically high tier.
That by itself is a signal, and that's my other beef. A signal doesn't just have to be a preset activity that can be tracked by a platform, because if that's the case, then your competitors can also track that. So anyone who's not listening us can go and implement that, or can go enable that within Clay or whatever it is. Like I think for me, signals is like, okay, he attended the Joe Rogan podcast, or he's following Bill on LinkedIn, and that means that he cares about outbound. And we want companies that are in that ICP and care about outbound. Or he commented on Adam Robinson's latest post about building a data platform, whatever it is. So he understands what Claude does. He understands the problem of data, cost of data, and he wants to work with Claude. And these are all the signals that I need, knowing that Bill is doing it right now. Or he's attending a conference about how to grow a hair salon. It's a hair salon that wants to grow. Like that by itself is enough of a signal. We don't have to overthink it in that way. But still, people who are smart about how they define the signals get the best kind of results. And I think that's what historically SDRs, like the best SDRs, have done. It's the people who haven't just looked at the LinkedIn profile, but have maybe gone a few steps further, have looked into custom communities, have looked into Slack groups, have seen different ways that they can engage people or get access to the same audience, but from a different route, because you might have the same prospect, they might belong to your ICP, but if you mention something that they care about, and you know that they care about that, a community, an event, whatever it is, not something that's public info at least, something that you have to dig a little bit deeper with, you have a better conversation starter, not for any other reason, but just because you know one more extra piece of info. That's the signal.
You made a post recently about email deliverability, about how Google is changing, how Gmail sorts your inbox, and you had a webinar with Zero Bounce. What was the old way and what is the new way?
Yeah, I mean, the old way is, I think we've both been on Instagram long enough, or Facebook, where every single post that your friends did, you would see it in the order that it was kind of published. So if I have 3 friends and each of them publishes, throughout the day, one post at a time, I would see it in the exact sequence, in the order that they've published it. That's called chronological order, which is what it was also happening with Instagram, what happened with most platforms before the algorithms start coming in. And the algorithms started saying, oh, Bill's interacting with Joseph's content more, let's surface more of his posts, even if it's older posts, because they seem to be hanging out, they seem to be DMing each other, they seem to be whatever it is. So that's also how our inboxes in a chronological order have always been sorted. Because, I think there's a few different reasons. The first thing is no one owns email, and we use the platforms that we use, including Outlook, Google, etc., to access something that's kind of like a preset communication method, communication way. And that's why I also called emails never gonna go away. People are always gonna need to have a work email at work, at least. So it's always gonna work as a channel, even if it gets harder. So what now Google is thinking about, and they're calling it like AI prioritization or whatever, is on the top of the inbox you would have emails from people that you've either interacted with before, or there's some sort of like signal that you've engaged with them, you've maybe responded to them in the past, or you're aware of their company, because they want to make it more, engagement driven. So that's what kind of like they're launching. Thankfully hasn't been rolled out as like the default way of looking at your inbox, because if they did, it would be quite drastic and quite dramatical as well, I'd say. And I don't know if they're ever planning on doing that, but it's now out there. Like AI can look at the people that you engage with, and it can kind of pretty much deprioritize completely anyone you've never spoken to or anyone who maybe wants something from you, and then prioritize things that seem warm. We might still be able to kind of cheat the system by pretending and doing warm-up, but they're claiming that the AI is going to be trained individually at your own preferences, which might be a dangerous thing. Again, I don't want to make predictions and be like, the end of X is coming, but it's definitely worth being aware of what the situation is. So if there's a different solution, or if it actually ends up materializing in a way we need to face, we kind of already know a little bit what way we need to go to.
Interesting. So like instead of it being based off like, are there spam words? Are you sending too many emails? Like it's going to be more based on like sentiment per email. Like, does this person know this person? There might be a few spam words, but does this person have a real reason? And it's like actually looking at the macro as well as like the micro as well. I'm really interested actually in your opinion on this, because again, it comes back to the BDR, but you again enable sales teams. So I think it's relevant. If you send low volume, say 30 emails a day, as a BDR, because I think that's probably a good number. Do you have to care that much about spam checking for, not using the word million or the dollar sign, or can you be a bit more relaxed? Are those like copy rules, all these fine tuning things, is that only really relevant when you have high volume sending, or does it apply for low volume as well?
I don't think you're in danger like by sending out like one wrong, let's say, email, even if you send 2 or 3. The main issue when you're doing this from 100 inboxes a month, all sending out the same copy, is you're sending the same email, because it's a templated approach typically, to hundreds of people. And then Google, I think after 75,000 sends of the same template, is able to pick up that this is a template. And then that's also when a flow starts losing its quality and being delivered to the inbox, regardless if it has spam words or not. So if you're sending as an individual, most likely one email is not looking the same as the other, because if it isn't, you probably are doing a crappy job. So I'm not talking about that case, but assuming that you're personalizing your emails and no 2 emails are exactly alike, I don't think it's the end of the world, or that you're gonna get super flagged if you send an email with like a dollar sign or referencing million and things like that. I think it's also common sense at the end of the day. Like if you promise a result, if you promise someone, I'll make you $10 million, it might also not be perceived in the best kind of way. So I would be a little bit more cautious about the content itself, not from the sense of like, am I getting blocked from the spam filters? Because the chances are quite low, but it's more like, how is it going to be perceived from the other end?
I kind of do want to chat about expertise, because I think this is interesting. They've kind of blown my mind on value. Like it's redefined the word value, because they give so much value in the products, like genuinely amazing. And as a salesperson, you believe in it. And they genuinely do offer a money back guarantee. Like you can expect 22% in your software savings, but whatever reason, and this hasn't happened, we'll give you a minimum savings guarantee. If we don't hit it, you get all your money back. But then you have to think about, you don't want to use the word guarantee, you don't want to use the word ROI in your emails, but it's also part of making it such a no-brainer offer. So I guess my question to you is, do you want to be including something like that in the email? But then the wider picture of, a lot of business owners are like, guarantees aren't great. And I kind of got caught in that trap. And now I've gone to the other side, which is, if your product is so good that you can guarantee an outcome, offer a guarantee, you know? But like in your case, you can't guarantee outcomes because it's more about, does this rep have better data so they can get more call time, so they can get more pickups? Like that's what you can control. So I understand there's some scenarios where you can't guarantee outcomes as well, right?
Yeah, or you might be able to guarantee deliverability, for example, that if you don't fuck up the sequences by, wanting to use and by, only wanting to use your version of the copy, which might not work, we can guarantee that the email is going to reach the inbox. Otherwise, we've done things really not on just the inbox, the primary tab. Otherwise, we've done things wrong from our end. I don't have a strong opinion, to be honest with you. I think if you can guarantee something as a business, you should be doing it. I think it's smart and it minimizes risk. There's always a chance of being perceived as a scammer, but I don't think having a guarantee alone does that. But I've spoken to many people that tell me, oh, I worked with this agency that guaranteed us 5,000 leads or whatever, and we never got shit. And I don't want that vibe. So it's not something that we are doing, for example, or at least it's not something that we're actively doing. We might do it at some point, but I don't think it's our biggest differentiator, because I always tell people, like, if we can't prove to you that we know why the campaigns aren't performing and what the clear next steps are to fix them, stop working with us. I don't give a fuck. Anyways, but leaving that aside, I don't think the goal of one email is to close the deal. So I would be a bit more hesitant about including guarantees and things like that on an email, at least if it's not tested, because I'm always happy to be proven wrong, because you don't want to explain the entire pitch. And it goes back to, like, what is the actual goal of the outbound? Is it to get a call booked? Is it to get someone to know who you are? Is it to start a conversation? Is it to learn more about the account? Is it to invite them to a webinar? So, and also, how innovative is it what you're selling? And are you only going to get through if you mention the guarantee? If yes, maybe you should mention it. If not, I wouldn't go so heavy on the offer itself, because I would want to get probably a response. But again, it goes back to what your goal is. If your goal is to simply jump on a call with them, I think there are smarter things that you can say that will attract their attention. But generally speaking, offering value in your outbound and in your message and in your product is the most certain way to get people interested. People are like, oh, what is a good offer? Oh, how do I make my message better? Simply offer something that people care about. That's it. Like that's the stupidity test that you have to do. Offer or say something that people care about, and then you'll magically see responses coming to you.
Yeah, I could ask follow-up question after follow-up question, but I do want to respect your time. Let's just do a quick fire round on data. I guess the first question is, what is your contact data enrichment workflow? And what I mean by that is, do you use Better Contact for your waterfalls? Do you use Clay? Do you use both? Or is there a single provider? And then obviously you've got the catch-alls versus deliverable, like using no bounce and zero bounce and things like that. So I'm curious to know kind of how you go about finding the best phone and email data.
Yeah, so it's not an easy question to answer, because better data is dependent on the audience and the region you're going after, and the industry as well. So what we found out is, because we don't want to have one waterfall enrichment and then for whatever industry or region of the world we can't find data for, we're like, okay, the match rate is 10%, fuck off. So we literally review the match rates of different email platforms, email data providers on a monthly basis. And we also advise or implement different stacks of waterfall enrichment. And which is one of the good things about Clay, is that you can change the waterfall flow itself. So depending on where we get the most usage, we'll buy direct API access from that data provider. But then that also goes hand in hand with what kind of data do we need for this project? Because the data providers for the Middle East are not the same as the data providers for Europe versus North America. So for each different case, we almost have a different Clay table built that gives us the kind of the best match rate possible. And then similarly for different industries, there's different data providers. And that also, even within the same provider, the match rates might drop because they, for whatever reason, added data that wasn't fresh. So that's something that we constantly test. We do prefer using more platforms than just one, so we can have better data. Clay is part of the process, but so is Prospeo and quite a few other tools as well. But we're always on the lookout. We'll get data providers reaching out to us all the time. We'll test them all the time. That's what we do, and then we'll adjust, our usage. And then for new audiences, we'll like once again check what kind of match rate do we get, and if we're not happy with what we've been getting, we'll test out other tools as well till we find the right sequence. That's also the most cost efficient as well. And that's why it's like, do you want to have an SDR do that? Like, do you want to have an SDR check data quality between Prospeo and Find Email and have them do data validation on zero bounds? Like, you don't want to, like, you want them writing smart copy that speaks to every individual prospect. And you want to have a different person in charge of the data and data quality and data workflows.
It's interesting, but then I use Prospeo a lot, and I'm a big fan of what they've done, and they've launched the new version, but there is a lot of data missing, and then you've got Better Contact, and I've not used it, but I know that the waterfall order changes depending on industry and location. So does it make sense to just trust a Better Contact and just use them inside your Clay table? Or is there still a value in going to Prospeo for data, going to kind of various sources?
We embed multiple ones within Clay. Like, that's what we're doing for now. If that changes and we're always testing, we'll change our approach. So it's like, as of May 2026, this is what we're doing. Like, but if next month something comes along that completely changes things, that's the good thing about running an agency. Like, you don't have to kiss someone's, you can go with, and this is one thing I genuinely like about us. Like, we're not going to be pitching a tool because it's offering us the highest affiliate rate, because we're friends with the fund. Like, obviously we do want to be friends with everyone that we work with, but if they stop providing the best product and the best experience, we're not going to keep using them, because what we want at the end of the day is the most cost efficient result and the best possible result. So if that means that we stop using X tool, or we stop using Y tool, or we introduce something else, that's what we're going to do. And that's also like our version of like a guarantee. It's like, we're not going to sell you out, because it's in our best interest to get you results for the best possible price, and that's it, period.
Yeah, that makes sense, and they can give you access to their tool, but that comes back to you being a marketer. You want to build trust with your audience. You don't want to lose trust by promoting a tool that you don't actually believe in. And then the other question then is around data for signals. I know Jack Porter recently came on. Massive fan of what he's doing, because it's like you can really like dig deep into a lot of different signals and stack them all together and create scores. Then you can obviously use Clay. You can use signals at the Prospeo level now, where it's like just searching for recent funding. How do you go about that, and what do you find is the best data source for signals?
So again, we don't label signals as like the insights you get. So we will always obviously use pre-built signals. They're always worth testing. The most important things about signals is testing at least 8 to 10 on a monthly basis if you want to actually say that you've leveraged them. And this was our mistake back in the day. A few years ago when we started testing signals, that we're like, okay, what's the one signal that makes sense for this account or for ourselves? And we would test one signal, it wouldn't work, and we would be like, oh, signals don't work. So when we ended up testing 10 signals, 3 of them worked, and those were the signals that we then also scaled. So I think signals require kind of like a marketing brain / optimization if you want to have that. And that's why we always test multiple ones. Some are pre-built in the platforms, some are scraping different data sources or different data providers, and we always kind of mix and match. We do what we call like the campaign plan. So on a monthly basis, we kind of predetermine the campaigns that we're going to run and the A/B tests that we're going to be running as part of these campaigns. And that allows us, no matter the tool, no matter the platform, no matter where the data is coming from, we might use Trigify, we might use Signal-based, we might use Clay data, we might scrape something of our own. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we can track the performance against the data source, which is mapped into one campaign and one ICP, of course. So we can then come back and say, okay, this signal, this way of getting this signal worked. Let's do more of this.
Can we talk about Cold IQ versus Workflows versus Sales Captain? Who is best for what? Or do you feel like you're naturally different and you specialize in different things?
I genuinely don't spend that much time researching exactly what our competitors do. So I don't think, like, even if I wanted to, I don't think I can answer the question, with doing justice to them. So I can't really tell you if there's things that we do best. At the end of the day, I think it's feedback from the market that I always look at, and that's what I care about. And that's, someone was asking me, and we were having that conversation with a founder of a signal-based platform, and I told him like, as we scale, the number one thing that I want for Sales Captain is that we continue having people, even the clients that end up churning, to say good things about us, to say that we're not assholes, to say that we're not scammers. Like that's going to be my goal, because I know that if you trust your go-to-market to someone else to an extent, it's not always going to work, because the time is too small, because your SDRs can't close, because there's other things that go on in the process. That's not entirely, the agency's fault, or maybe the market doesn't want a specific product anymore. I would say like that would be my core kind of thing. But yeah, I know where Cold IQ and workflows started from. I don't necessarily know what they're actively pitching right now, so I can't really answer that question again. I only know what we do and how we kind of go ourselves to market.
That is an ace answer, because like you always hear like founders fall down when they start focusing on their competitors, and you've just basically said we're focused so much on our customers that we're not even thinking. I think that's amazing.
If they start selling oranges tomorrow, we're gonna probably look twice and be like, why are they selling oranges? You know what I mean? Like if they change their business model entirely, I'm gonna use it as a signal to maybe reevaluate where the market is, and we're doing that to an extent, right? Like we meet with people, with Alex from Understory and a lot of other people. We get to talk to them at conferences, we get to hear their opinions. It's not like they don't exist, but we don't base our entire go-to-market and approach just on competitors. We use a lot of different things as signals, and that includes competitors, that includes clients, that includes the platforms out there, that includes influencers and thought leaders, content from conferences. Competitors are one part for sure, and it does say and it does explain a few things about where the market is at, but it can't be the only thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, and also like you could produce the same tool, but the packaging is slightly different, where one of them's serving lower market and does more volume, and someone's
Correct.
serving like higher market, or just a slightly different stage or a different sized team. And so it's like, are you really competitors? Are you fighting over the same recent funding round? Not really, because you've got all these like deeper levels of signals about who is best for you. And that ICP is specific. It's not generic.
And I know, for example, that we go to market in different ways. What I can appreciate about Cold IQ, for example, is that they're also going to market in the most efficient way for who the founders are, from what I understand at least, and who the team is. And we also do the same as well. And we also have our own channels, which are not the same channels, which are actually working really well for us. And I think that's like the smart play. It's like, and my probably biggest advice is like, it doesn't necessarily matter how you go to market, as long as it's in a way that's kind of comes natural to your business and obviously fits with your business model. That always has to be there. But as long as you're doing it in a smart way, I think that's what I care about most.
I like it. And the final question then, and this was a tough one. I made this one tough because, I've said at the beginning, like, everything you do, you're the reason I've gotten GTM. And we kind of answered this question, which is you don't just do cold email now. You're doing a lot of intelligence to support sales teams. But what I would say is, as a BDR, selling like 100K ACV, let's say, like cold calling is the number one channel, like hands down for like booking meetings. Obviously with email and with LinkedIn as well, even better. I'm curious to know, like, are you starting to add cold calling into your list of services? What's your kind of plan, like internally, like what's your future offering? Are you looking to be that intelligence, or do you still see value in being that cold email specialist along with doing these custom builds and all these other things you're doing?
Yeah, I ended up, I was talking to an agency owner and he was sharing how he's going a little bit more the RevOps route and the more consulting route. And it ended up being really organic. And I was sitting next to Theo, who does all of our go-to-market. And the conversation was like, my background, Theo's background as well, has always been marketing. So I always like when you can go to market in a way that you can scale. And I always like channels that are scalable. We're looking into a lot of things. I'm not going to share all of them at the moment because there's some interesting things that we're working on. I am going to say that adding cold calling to our mix, at least with SDRs, is not one of the things that we're looking at, because I don't want to change the nature of the business. We have ads that we run, we do email, we do LinkedIn. There might be a voice element to it. It's probably not going to be powered by humans. That's as much as I can say. And that's also mostly the route that we're going to keep kind of walking at, and that's how it's been before Clay, and that's what it's mostly going to be about. Because that's the DNA of who we are as people. We're always going to want, to help businesses grow by helping them go to market. It might not always be 100% the same, and one of the things that I'm flexible about is we're always operating on the cutting edge, because that typically means a lot of savings for the business, a lot of efficiency, both in time as well as in budget. And we do get across maybe one or two deals that specifically want to do cold calling, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think cold calling requires a different type of business, of organization than the ones that we probably end up serving, which is completely fine, because it requires a lot of, it does work, but you need a lot of humans. You need time training them, you need time hiring them, you need time managing them, and I think that's something that's best handled in-house. That's my take. They're a more core part of your organization, which is amazing. So I think the natural progression is you have your marketing channels, and then depending on your ACV and your deal size and your sales cycles, you might start from marketing activities, including outbound as a marketing activity, including ads as a marketing activity, to scan maybe the 90% of the market or the 80% of the market. But if you want the 10 or 20% of the tier 1 accounts, you should probably have an SDR as well, who should not be wasting time going after the 70% of the market that you can automate or assign to marketing and outbound, whatever that includes, but only have them focus on the most important piece of the market. And I think that's the smart move to be doing. That's why doing the scoring, having different routes for different prospects makes a difference. Yes, you can get, we have a client that got a call booked with head of customer success at Ferrari, I think, or a brand like that from Italy last week. These things do happen, maybe a bit less frequently via email or LinkedIn, but they still do happen. But if your business requires a more ABM approach, it requires a smaller TAM, to be focused on by humans, you should have that layer. We would be the ones supporting that layer, and we would be adding more firepower before that layer comes, into play. We would be running the ads, we'd be creating and enriching the TAM, we would be running the outbound, we would be enabling, and then you would also have the calling part. So yeah, it's not something we're again, looking at building immediately. We have a few things that we're testing because our go-to-market team in-house for Sales Captain itself is quite strong, testing everything from, WhatsApp to actual AI SDRs because we want to know who we're competing with. Yeah, that's it.
Do things at scale. I also just keep coming back to the value of what you have is email, but the real value from my lens is all the intelligence. But like you said, what you've just said is completely hit home. There's a new BDR who's just joined Vitesse, and he was doing that as an agency for many tech companies. And we kind of had a little chat, and it was very clear that when you're on a call, you need to understand the product. As much as people like to talk about the pains, you need to drip feed value, and you need to drip feed about how things work while you're talking about the pains. How can you do that if you've got loads of different clients on the go? So I agree. I think BDR function needs to be in-house. You provide all that enablement, the data, everything, and you do have the skill for email. That's interesting. I'm excited to see what's going on. Is there anything I haven't said today? Is there a message you'd just like to share or talk about?
No, I think we've covered a good bunch of what has been on the foreground of things in 2026. A lot of the important questions, from is cold email dead to are people getting rid of Clay to how you can fit Claude code into your process, where SDRs still stand, if it's still worth being an SDR, I'd say, even as a topic in 2026. I think it was quite complete. I would say that the game is not over. I'd say a lot of things are just getting started. B2B is having the same moment as e-commerce was having back in the day with Facebook ads and Google ads and the whole kind of drop shipping era. I think we're seeing the same thing. And one important thing to keep in mind is not to miss out on that, because it's easy to miss out on it if you keep insisting that the same old data providers and the same old process and just having SDRs in-house is gonna cut it. The world is changing, and it's changing fast, and you can jump on board the train while it's still running at the pace that you can keep up and you can catch up with it. It might be a little bit later because there's going to be companies that are going to be going to market in frantically fast kind of ways. This is what I like about channels like LinkedIn, about email, about ads, that you can scale them like this. once you have the right feedback. And obviously that includes, a few other things in the process. But it's definitely an exciting time. That's it.
Look, I don't mean to be cheeky, but you've made another question come to mind, so I need to ask you really quickly. There's loads of GTM agencies popping up. What do you think your moat is? I know, and you're obviously thinking of where do we pivot. From my lens, it's the brand you've built and the trust you've built. For example, if I go to a scale up and they need all this RevOps enablement, 3 names come to mind, and you're one of those names. Do you think that it is that marketing moat, or how do you look to differentiate from all of these agencies that are popping up?
I would say at different stages of Sales Captain, the moat has been slightly different because we're now at a stage where we can support that, relationships and brand. It was in my head 2 or 3 years ago, and like we started posting on LinkedIn and we started creating content and doing webinars, even with a fifth of the views or a tenth of the views or the attendees that we now get, and slowly over time these things got built. Moats, I think, should by definition be boring. Like it's boring, being at every conference. It's boring being at the same industry for the past 10 years. It's boring not wanting to scam people and not wanting to, charge a one-off whatever fee and take their money and run. It's boring being there to fix things when they don't go well. It's boring spending time to create content without the direct ROI. It's boring hiring the best people. It's hard changing your process to fit the new things that have come to the market. So for an agency, for a service provider, you obviously need to be top of mind, so that's marketing. And you also need to be implementing the latest thing. And you need to have trust that the person you're going to work with is not going to screw you up and is actually going to give you the service that you actually need, that the service and the tools and the platform and the level of support, and they're going to let you go when they can provide value. That's what the moat is. Yes, there's agencies popping up, everywhere, but that's how it's always been. If you look at the lifespan of those agencies, though, you're going to see very, very few of them actually have, more than a few years of lifespan. Hopefully that's not going to be us. But again, as I said, that's not, that's not sexy. You can't sell. We've been around, we create content. Does it work? Yes, it does, because we genuinely enjoy what we do. We don't do it just for the money. We do it because it's genuinely nice. We do it because it allows us to build things through this journey that we get to kind of experience and have happy moments and have a lot of pleasure and joy just by doing the thing itself. And then as a bonus, people get to hear about it and they get to join on board, and you get to help them change their lives and you get to help them grow their businesses, and that creates more value for them and that creates more value to you as a consequence. So I think alignment at the end of the day is the moat. That's what the brand is. It's like alignment in that the promise I'm making you today, I'm going to be here to make it again tomorrow, and when things change, I'm going to still make you the same promise. The tunnel might not be the same, the tools might not be the same, but the direction is going to be the same. Alignment costs. Alignment is the same reason why a marriage might last for a lifetime versus 10 years. The what might change, but the why doesn't change.
I love that. What a pleasure, Bill. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you again for the invite.